Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag as he looked across his salvage yard. The morning sun cast long shadows between the hulks of broken ships and twisted metal that filled every corner of his property. Business had been terrible for months, and the bills were piling up faster than he could count them. His small operation on New Denver Colony was barely keeping him alive, and he knew something had to change soon, or he would lose everything. The yard held maybe 20 ships in various states of decay. Most were civilian transports that had seen better days, their hulls scarred by micrometeorite impacts and years of hard use. A few military surplus fighters sat in the back corner, their weapon systems long since removed and their engines stripped for parts. Jake had been hoping to find buyers for the larger pieces, but the market was slow and competition was fierce. He was checking the power readings on an old cargo hauler when he heard footsteps approaching from the main gate. Jake looked up to see a tall, thin figure walking toward him. The visitor was clearly not human, with pale blue skin and elongated limbs that moved with an odd, flowing grace. The alien wore simple brown robes that covered most of his body and a hood that shadowed his face. "You are the owner of this establishment?" the alien asked in accented but clear English. His voice had a musical quality that made each word sound like part of a song. "That would be me," Jake replied, setting down his tools and walking over to meet the stranger, Jake Morrison. "What can I do for you?" The alien pulled back his hood, revealing a face with large, dark eyes and features that seemed somehow familiar despite being clearly non-human. "I am called Vex. I have come to sell you a ship." Jake raised an eyebrow. Most of his business came from people wanting to buy parts, not sell entire vessels. "What kind of ship are we talking about?" Vex gestured toward the gate where Jake could now see a large transport hovering just outside his property. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of anything currently in his yard. Even from a distance, Jake could see that it had taken serious damage. Scorch marks covered the hull and several sections showed the twisted metal signatures of weapons fire, a merchant vessel, Vex explained. "The owner died in a pirate attack. I recovered it from the debris field, but I have no use for such a damaged craft. I thought perhaps you might be interested in purchasing it for salvage." Jake walked closer to get a better look at the ship. It was definitely a transport of some kind, but the design was unlike anything in his databases. The hull had an organic quality to it, with smooth curves and flowing lines that seemed to shift and change as he watched. The damage was extensive, but not beyond repair, at least not for someone with his skills. "What are you asking for it?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. He had learned long ago that showing too much interest in a deal was a quick way to drive up the price. 50,000 credits, Vex replied. Jake almost laughed. A ship that size, even heavily damaged, should be worth at least 10 times that amount. Either this alien had no idea what he was selling, or there was something seriously wrong with the vessel that Jake could not see from the outside. "That seems low," Jake said carefully. "What is the catch?" Vex shifted slightly, his dark eyes never leaving Jake's face. "The computer systems are completely destroyed. The previous owner had some kind of security protocol that wiped everything when the ship was boarded. Without the navigation data and system controls, the ship is essentially useless except for parts that made more sense. A ship without working computers was like a car without an engine. It might look impressive, but it would never fly again without major work. Still, the hull alone was worth more than 50,000 credits, and Jake was confident he could rebuild the computer systems given enough time. "I will need to inspect it first," Jake said. "I do not buy anything sight unseen." Vex nodded and led him toward the ship. As they got closer, Jake could see that the damage was even more extensive than he had first thought. The weapons fire had not been random, but seemed to target specific systems with surgical precision. Whoever had attacked this ship knew exactly what they were doing. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Jake followed Vex inside. The interior was spacious and well-designed, with wide corridors and high ceilings that made the ship feel more like a building than a spacecraft. The walls were made of the same organic-looking material as the hull, with a subtle pattern that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "The main computer core is this way," Vex said, leading Jake through a series of corridors toward the center of the ship. They passed several rooms that looked like they had been living quarters, each one larger and more luxurious than anything Jake had seen on a merchant vessel. The computer core was a disaster. Banks of processors had been melted by some kind of energy weapon, and the main data storage units were nothing but twisted metal and fused crystals. Jake ran his hands over the damage, noting the precise nature of the destruction. This had not been done by pirates, but by someone who knew exactly how to disable the ship without destroying it completely. "As you can see, there is nothing left," Vex said. "The ship is yours for parts only," Jake continued his inspection, moving through the cargo bays and engine compartments. The ship was huge, with enough space to carry a small city worth of goods. The engines were intact but offline, their exotic design unlike anything he had worked with before. The power core was some kind of advanced fusion reactor that should have been impossible to build with current technology. "I can offer you 30,000, Jake said finally. "That is all I can afford, and honestly, it might be more than the ship is worth in this condition." Vex was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying Jake's face. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. 30,000 credits. But I want payment immediately, and I want to be gone before you begin any major work on the systems." They shook hands, and Jake transferred the credits from his account to Vex's. The alien seemed eager to leave and was walking toward the airlock. Before the transaction was even complete, Jake watched him go, wondering what he had gotten himself into. As Vex's transport disappeared into the afternoon sky, Jake stood alone in his new acquisition. The ship was his now, all several thousand tons of damaged, mysterious spacecraft. He had no idea what he was going to do with it, but for the first time in months, he felt like he had made a good deal. The silence inside the ship was complete except for the soft hum of the life support systems. Jake walked back toward the computer core, already planning how he would begin the repairs. He had a feeling this ship was going to change his life, though he had no idea how right he was going to be. Jake spent the next 3 days just walking through the ship and making notes. Every time he thought he had figured out the layout, he would find another corridor or room that seemed to lead somewhere impossible. The ship was far larger inside than it appeared from the outside, with spaces that defied basic geometry. He began to suspect that the vessel used some kind of advanced technology to fold space, though he had no idea how such a thing could work. The power systems were the most confusing part. The main reactor was completely unlike anything in his technical manuals, using principles that seemed to violate everything he knew about physics. When he finally managed to get a diagnostic reading, the numbers made no sense. The reactor was producing more energy than it was consuming, which should have been impossible according to every law of thermodynamics he had ever learned. On the 4th day, Jake decided to start working on the computer systems. He had salvaged processing units from a dozen other ships and thought he could at least get basic functions running. The work was slow and frustrating, with every connection requiring custom adapters that he had to build from scratch. The ship's technology was clearly far more advanced than anything humans had developed. He was deep in the main computer core, trying to route power to a new processing unit, when something unexpected happened. The lights around him flickered and then stabilized. At a brighter level, Jake looked up to see displays coming online throughout the room, their screens filled with symbols he did not recognize. A soft humming sound began to fill the air, growing stronger as more systems activated. "Warning," a voice said suddenly, speaking in perfect English from speakers Jake had not even noticed. "Unauthorized personnel detected in restricted area. Please identify yourself immediately." Jake nearly dropped his tools in surprise. The voice was calm and professional, with just a hint of an accent that he could not place. He looked around the room but saw no one else. "Hello," Jake said, feeling foolish for talking to empty air. "I am Jake Morrison. I own this ship now." There was a pause, then the voice spoke again. "Accessing personnel records. No individual named Jake Morrison found in authorized user database. Please present Imperial credentials for verification. Imperial credentials, Jake repeated. I do not have any Imperial credentials. I bought this ship from someone named Vex. I have the transfer documents if you want to see them. The pause was longer this time. Jake could hear the soft whir of processors working in the background, as if the ship was thinking about what he had said. Finally, the voice returned, sounding slightly different than before. I apologize for the confusion. I am Protocol 7, the ship's artificial intelligence system. There appears to have been some kind of error in my memory banks. Please state your position and intended use for this vessel. Jake set down his tools and looked around the room. He was talking to a computer, which was strange enough, but the computer seemed to be confused about who owned the ship. That was even stranger. I am a salvage dealer, Jake explained. I bought this ship to repair it and either sell it or break it down for parts. The previous owner said it belonged to a merchant who died in a pirate attack. Negative, Protocol 7 said immediately. This vessel has never been owned by a merchant. Ship records indicate primary user was classified as Level 1 Imperial. Authority. Previous statement contains factual errors. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Level 1 Imperial Authority sounded like something much more important than a simple merchant. The Galactic Dominion used classification levels for their military and government officials, with Level 1 being reserved for only the highest ranks. What kind of ship is this exactly? Jake asked. Classification restricted, Protocol 7 replied. Current user does not possess adequate clearance for full disclosure. However, basic specifications indicate this is a personal transport vessel designed for long-range reconnaissance and diplomatic missions. Jake laughed nervously. A diplomatic ship, he said. That would explain why it is so big and fancy. But why would a diplomat need all this advanced technology? Advanced technology, Protocol 7 repeated. Please specify which systems you are referring to, the power core for one thing. It seems to be producing more energy than it uses. That should be impossible. There was another pause, longer than the others. When Protocol 7 spoke again, his voice sounded cautious. Power core specifications are classified. Current user does not possess adequate clearance for technical details. Recommend consulting with authorized maintenance personnel. Jake was getting frustrated. Every question he asked seemed to run into the same wall of classification and clearance levels. He decided to try a different approach. Protocol 7, can you tell me about the damage to the ship? He asked. What happened to cause all this? Destruction accessing incident reports, Protocol 7 said. The pause, this time, was very long, with the sound of processors working hard in the background. Warning, multiple system failures detected. Primary memory banks show evidence of deliberate data corruption. Unable to provide complete incident summary. What can you tell me? Limited data suggests the ship was attacked by multiple hostiles, using military-grade weapons. Damage patterns indicate the attackers were familiar with ship specifications and targeted critical systems with precision strikes. Computer core was wiped by emergency protocol to prevent data capture. Jake nodded. That matched what he had seen when he first inspected the damage. The attack had been too precise to be random pirates. Who would have that kind of detailed knowledge about this ship? Jake asked, unable to determine. Relevant personnel files have been corrupted or deleted. However, damage patterns suggest attackers had access to classified technical specifications. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about what he had learned. The ship belonged to someone with high-level imperial authority, not a simple merchant. It had been attacked by people who knew exactly how to disable it without destroying it completely. And now the AI was having memory problems that prevented it from giving him straight answers. Protocol 7, I need to ask you something important, Jake said. Is this ship dangerous? Define dangerous, Protocol 7 replied. Could it hurt people? Does it have weapons or other systems that could be used to cause harm? The pause, this time, was the longest yet. Jake could hear systems cycling on and off throughout the ship, as if Protocol 7 was checking every corner of the vessel. Current user does not possess adequate clearance for weapon system information, Protocol 7 said finally. However, ship defensive capabilities are within normal parameters for vessels of this classification. Jake did not like the sound of that. Normal parameters for a diplomatic ship should not include significant weapon systems. Protocol 7? I want you to run a complete diagnostic on all ship systems, Jake said. I need to know what I am dealing with here, Diagnostic initiated, Protocol 7 replied. Estimated completion time is 6 hours. Warning: diagnostic process may activate dormant systems. Recommend all personnel maintain safe distance from primary operational areas. Jake looked around the computer core with new eyes. He was standing in the middle of a ship that was far more than it appeared to be, owned by someone much more important than a simple merchant and equipped with technology that should not exist. Whatever he had bought from Vex was going to be either the best deal of his life or the thing that got him killed. The diagnostic process had begun, and there was no turning back now. Jake gathered his tools and headed for the exit, wondering what other surprises the ship would reveal about itself. Jake woke up to the sound of alarms blaring throughout the ship. He had spent the night in his small office at the salvage yard, but the noise was so loud it carried across the entire property. He ran toward the alien vessel, grabbing his tools. An emergency kit on the way. The ship's exterior lights were flashing in patterns he had never seen before, and he could hear the hum of systems powering up inside. The airlock opened before he could reach it, and Protocol 7's voice echoed across the morning air. Jake Morrison, please report to the main computer core immediately. Diagnostic process has revealed critical information requiring your immediate attention. Jake hurried through the corridors, noting that lights were active throughout the ship now. Systems that had been dead for days were running at full power, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. When he reached the computer core, he found displays active on every wall, showing star charts and data streams that scrolled too fast for him to read. Protocol 7, what is happening? Jake asked, slightly out of breath from running. Diagnostic process has restored access to previously corrupted memory banks, Protocol 7 replied. Information regarding ship's true purpose and previous owner has been recovered. Data indicates you were provided with false information regarding the nature of this vessel. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He had suspected something was wrong from the beginning, but he had hoped his concerns were just paranoia. What kind of false information? Jake asked. This vessel was never owned by a merchant, Protocol 7 said. Ship records indicate primary. User was Emperor Zephan VII, supreme ruler of the Galactic Dominion. This vessel served as his personal transport and mobile command center for a period of 17 years. Jake stared at the displays around him, trying to process what he had just heard. The Galactic Dominion was the largest political entity in known space, controlling thousands of worlds and trillions of beings. The Emperor was the most powerful individual in the galaxy, with authority over massive military forces and resources. Beyond imagination, that is impossible, Jake said. Why would an emperor sell his personal ship to a salvage dealer on a backwater colony? Emperor Zephan did not sell this vessel, Protocol 7 replied. Records indicate the ship was seized during a military coup attempt 6 months ago. The emperor escaped but was presumed dead by rebel forces. Current location and status of Emperor Zephan are unknown. Jake sank into a nearby chair, his mind racing. If the ship belonged to the Galactic Emperor, then it was not just valuable but potentially dangerous. Possessing imperial property without authorization was probably a crime punishable by death in most sectors of the galaxy. Protocol 7, who was the alien that sold me this ship? Jake asked. Displaying recovered security footage from external cameras, Protocol 7 said. One of the wall displays changed to show a clear image of Vex as he had appeared at the salvage yard. Facial recognition analysis indicates this individual is Emperor Zephan VII using advanced biological disguise technology. Jake stared at the image in shock. The features were different, but now that he knew what to look for, he could see similarities in the bone structure and the way the figure moved. The Emperor had not only survived the coup, but had personally delivered his own ship to Jake. Why? Jake asked. Why would he do that? Accessing personal logs of Emperor Zephan, Protocol 7 said, "Warning, these files contain classified information of the highest security level. Current user does not possess adequate clearance for access. However, given current circumstances, security protocols are being overridden. The displays around the room changed to show what looked like a private study. A figure sat behind a large desk, his face hidden in shadow. When he spoke, Jake recognized the voice immediately. It was Vex, but without the accent and musical quality he had used at the salvage yard. Personal log, day 4012 of my reign, the figure said. I have been studying the humans for 6 years now, and I am convinced they represent the most significant threat to galactic stability since the Void Wars, not because they are militarily superior, but because they think in ways that make no sense to any other species. Jake watched as the Emperor leaned forward into the light, revealing features that were clearly alien but somehow familiar. The large dark eyes and elongated limbs were the same as Vex, but the bone structure was different, more angular and imposing. Human military tactics are completely unpredictable, the Emperor continued. They win battles they should lose, and lose battles they should win. They use civilian equipment as weapons and turn their weaknesses into strengths. My generals cannot understand how to fight them because they do not follow any logical pattern. The log continued with the Emperor describing various human conflicts he had observed. Jake was amazed to hear detailed analysis of battles from the Colonial Wars and the Outer Rim Rebellion, fights that had taken place decades before humans had any contact with the Galactic Dominion. The humans have been preparing for Galactic contact for generations, the Emperor said in another log entry. They study warfare obsessively, not because they are naturally violent, but because they understand that conflict is inevitable when different species meet. They are the only race I have encountered that actively plans for fighting enemies they have never seen. Jake watched dozens of log entries, learning that the Emperor had been secretly visiting human colonies for years. He had studied their technology, their culture, and their military capabilities. More importantly, he had come to respect them in a way that clearly troubled him. My advisors believe humans should be eliminated before they become a threat, the Emperor said in what appeared to be his final log entry. They want to launch a preemptive strike against their colonies while they are still weak and divided. I have refused to authorize such an action, but I fear my time is running out. The log showed the Emperor looking directly at the camera, his dark eyes filled with an emotion Jake could not identify. If something happens to me, if the coup succeeds, this ship must reach human hands, the Emperor said. They will need every advantage they can get when the Dominion comes for them. The technology in this vessel is centuries ahead of anything they currently possess. Perhaps it will be enough to give them a chance. The log ended, and the displays returned to their normal data streams. Jake sat in silence for a long moment, trying to understand what he had just seen. The Emperor had not just survived a coup attempt, but had planned for it. He had deliberately placed his ship in human hands as a gift or a weapon. Protocol 7, what am I supposed to do with this information? Jake asked. Unknown, Protocol 7 replied. However, ship sensors indicate multiple vessels approaching this system. Configuration suggests Dominion military forces. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. If the Dominion was coming, they were not coming to negotiate. They were coming to destroy him and recover the ship. Can this ship fight? Jake asked. Affirmative, Protocol 7 said. Vessel is equipped with advanced defensive and offensive capabilities. However, current user lacks training in Imperial combat systems. Probability of successful engagement is low. Jake stood up and looked around the computer core. He was a simple mechanic who had stumbled into a galactic conspiracy. He had no military training and no experience with alien technology. But he had something the Emperor had recognized as valuable, the ability to think like a human. Protocol 7, begin weapons. System initialization, Jake said, and start teaching me how to use them. Jake stood in what Protocol 7 called the command center, staring at displays that showed the approaching Dominion fleet. 12 massive warships were moving toward New Denver colony at full speed, their hulls bristling with weapons that could level entire cities. He had never seen anything so terrifying in his life, and in 3 hours they would be close enough to destroy him. Protocol 7, how do I pilot this ship? Jake asked, his hands shaking as he tried to understand the alien. Control systems. Imperial combat training normally requires 2 years of intensive study, Protocol 7 replied. However, emergency protocols allow for abbreviated instruction. Place your hands on the primary control interface. Jake pressed his palms against a smooth panel that immediately began to glow with soft blue light. Information flooded his mind, not as words or images, but as direct knowledge. He suddenly understood how to read the navigation displays, how to control the ship's movement, and how to activate the defensive systems. The sensation was overwhelming and made him feel sick to his stomach. The neural interface is transferring basic operational knowledge, Protocol 7 explained. Your human brain processes information differently than expected. The transfer is taking longer than normal but appears to be successful. Jake felt the ship respond to his thoughts, lifting off from the salvage yard with smooth grace. The engines made no sound, but he could feel their power thrumming through the hull. He guided the vessel away from the colony, not wanting to bring the coming battle to innocent people. Incoming transmission from Dominion Fleet, Protocol 7 announced. Admiral Craxus is requesting communication. Put him through, Jake said. Though he had no idea what he was going to say, the main display showed a reptilian face with cold yellow eyes and scarred features. The alien wore a military uniform covered in medals and rank insignia. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. You are in possession of stolen Imperial property, Admiral Craxus said. Surrender immediately, and you will be granted a quick death. Resist, and you will suffer for days before we end your miserable existence. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. He had done nothing wrong except buy a ship that was offered to him legally. Now this alien was threatening to kill him for it. This ship was sold to me by its rightful owner, Jake replied. I have the transfer documents to prove it. Admiral Craxus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The traitor emperor is dead. His property belongs to the Dominion now. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we open fire. The transmission ended, and Jake was alone again with Protocol 7. He looked at the approaching fleet and felt fear unlike anything he had ever experienced. 12 warships against 1. Damaged transport seemed like an impossible fight. Protocol 7, what weapons do we have? Jake asked. This vessel is equipped with defensive barriers, energy cannons, and quantum torpedoes, Protocol 7 replied. However, we are heavily outnumbered. Recommend immediate retreat to hyperspace. Jake was about to agree when he remembered something from the Emperor's logs. Humans did not fight the way other species expected them to. They won by being unpredictable and using unconventional tactics. Maybe he could not defeat 12 warships in direct combat, but he did not have to fight them directly. Protocol 7, scan the system for asteroid fields and debris clouds, Jake said. And give me detailed information about Dominion military tactics, searching, Protocol 7 said. Large asteroid field located 6 million kilometers from current position. Dominion tactical doctrine emphasizes formation fighting and coordinated attacks. They prefer to engage enemies in open space where their superior numbers provide maximum advantage. Jake smiled grimly. That was exactly what he had hoped to hear. The Dominion wanted to fight him in open space, so he was going to make sure that did not happen. He guided the ship toward the asteroid field, diving between massive rocks and using their bulk to break up the fleet's formation. The warships followed but were forced to split up to avoid collisions. Jake used the ship's superior maneuverability to dart between asteroids, always staying just out of range of their weapons. This is not standard combat procedure, Protocol 7 observed. Imperial doctrine calls for direct engagement of enemy forces. I am not Imperial, Jake replied. spinning the ship around a particularly large asteroid and firing a burst from the energy cannons. The shot struck one of the pursuing warships, overloading its shields and forcing it to fall back. "I am human, and humans do not fight fair," the battle continued for hours, with Jake using every trick he could think of to stay alive. He hid behind asteroids and used their gravity to slingshot around corners. He fired from unexpected angles and disappeared into debris clouds before the enemy could return fire. Most importantly, he refused to fight the way the Dominion expected him to. "Enemy formation is breaking apart," Protocol 7 reported. "They are becoming frustrated with our unconventional tactics." Jake could see it too. The warships were spread out across the asteroid field, no longer able to coordinate their attacks. They were designed to fight in formation, supporting each other with overlapping fields of fire. Separated, they were still dangerous, but much less effective. "Time to even the odds," Jake said, targeting the nearest warship with a quantum torpedo. The weapon struck the enemy vessel amidships, tearing through its hull and causing a massive explosion. The ship broke apart in a shower of debris and flame. The destruction of one of their own seemed to enrage the Dominion forces. They began firing wildly into the asteroid field, not caring about collateral damage. Jake used their anger against them, leading them into traps where their own weapons fire would cause asteroids to break apart and create more obstacles. "Additional vessels approaching," Protocol 7 announced. "Configuration suggests rebel forces." Opposed to current Dominion leadership, Jake looked at the tactical display and saw a dozen new ships entering the system. These were smaller than the Dominion warships, but moved with the quick grace of fighters designed for hit-and-run attacks. They immediately began engaging the Imperial fleet, adding to the chaos in the asteroid field. "We are receiving a transmission from the rebel commander," Protocol 7 said. "Put it through," Jake replied. The display showed a female alien with green skin and fierce red eyes. She wore the uniform of a ship captain, but with modifications that suggested she was part of some kind of resistance movement. "Human vessel, this is Captain Zara of the Free Worlds Alliance," she said. "We know you carry the Emperor's ship. Will you fight with us against the Dominion?" Jake thought about the Emperor's logs and his warnings about what would happen to humanity if the Dominion was not stopped. He thought about Admiral Craxus and his threats of torture and death. Most of all, he thought about the fact that he was probably going to die anyway, so he might as well die fighting. "This is Jake Morrison," he replied. "I will fight with you." The battle in the asteroid field became a three-way conflict, with Jake and the rebels working together against the Dominion forces. Jake found that his unconventional tactics worked even better when he had allies who could take advantage of the confusion he created. By the time the fighting ended, half the Dominion fleet was destroyed and the rest were in full retreat. Jake had survived his first space battle, but he knew it would not be his last. Word of his existence would spread throughout the galaxy, and more enemies would come looking for him. "Protocol 7, prepare the hyperspace drive," Jake said. "We need to get out of here before reinforcements arrive." "Destination," Protocol 7 asked. Jake looked at the tactical display one more time, then at the rebel ships that had helped him survive. He was no longer just a salvage dealer with a mysterious ship. He was a symbol of resistance against the Dominion, whether he wanted to be or not. "Set course for the rebel base," Jake said. "We have work to do." Jake followed Captain Zara's ships to a hidden base built inside a massive asteroid. The rebel facility was larger than he had expected, with docking bays carved directly into the rock and corridors that stretched for kilometers through the asteroid's core. Hundreds of ships filled the bays, from tiny fighters to heavy cruisers, all bearing the marks of hard fighting against Dominion forces. The meeting hall where the rebel leaders gathered was simple but impressive, with a long table surrounded by representatives from dozens of different species. Jake had never seen so many aliens in one place, and he was surprised to realize that several of them looked almost human despite clearly being from other worlds. Captain Zara stood at the head of the table, her red eyes scanning the assembled leaders as she spoke. "The human has proven himself in battle and carries technology that could change the course of this war. The question is what we do with him now. A tall alien with blue skin and multiple arms raised one hand to speak. The Dominion will never stop hunting him. As long as he lives, we will all be targets for their revenge. Then what do you suggest? Asked another leader, this one covered in fur and speaking with a growling voice. That we hand him over to Admiral Craxus? Of course not, the blue alien replied, but we must be realistic about what his presence means. The Dominion has already sent one fleet after him. They will send more, larger ones, until either he is dead or we are all destroyed. Jake listened to the debate for over an hour, feeling more uncomfortable as time passed. These people had risked their lives to save him, but now they were arguing about whether his presence put them all in danger. He understood their concerns, but he also knew that running away would not solve anything. May I speak? Jake asked during a break in the conversation. The room fell silent and all eyes turned toward him. Jake stood up slowly, feeling the weight of their attention. I know I am not a politician or a military leader, Jake said. I am just a mechanic who bought the wrong ship at the wrong time. But I have been thinking about what Emperor Zephan said. In his logs about why he chose to give his ship to a human, Jake walked around the table, looking at each of the alien faces in turn. Despite their different appearances, he could see the same emotions in all of them. Fear, anger, and a desperate hope for something better. He said humans think differently than other species. We do not follow the same patterns or use the same tactics. Maybe that is what this war needs. Someone who does not think like a traditional military commander. Captain Zara leaned forward, her red eyes studying Jake's face. What are you suggesting? The Dominion expects us to fight them like rebels, hiding in asteroid fields and launching hit-and-run attacks. But what if we did something completely different? Jake paused, gathering his thoughts. What if we stopped fighting and started talking? The room erupted in angry voices, with several leaders shouting that negotiations with the Dominion were impossible. Jake waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Not negotiations, Jake said. Communication. Protocol 7 has access to the Imperial Communication Network. We could broadcast Emperor Zephan's logs to every world in Dominion space. Let people see what their former leader really thought about the current government. The logs are classified, one of the leaders objected. No one would believe they were real. Protocol 7 can verify their authenticity using Imperial security codes, Jake replied. And the Emperor included detailed information about corruption and incompetence in the current leadership. Information that people could verify for themselves. Captain Zara was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. It might work, she said finally. The Dominion maintains power through fear and propaganda. If people knew the truth about their leaders, it could cause widespread unrest, or it could cause them to crack down even harder, the blue alien warned. We could be making things worse for innocent civilians, Jake nodded, acknowledging the concern. That is a risk we would have to take. But right now, the Dominion is already oppressing billions of people. At least this way, they would have a choice about whether to resist. The debate continued for hours. But gradually the mood in the room began to shift. The rebel leaders were tired of fighting a war they could not win through military action alone. The idea of using information as a weapon appealed to many of them, especially those who had lost friends and family in failed attacks on Dominion positions. If we do this, it cannot be traced back to this base, Captain Zara said. The human and his ship would have to broadcast from somewhere else, somewhere the Dominion could not immediately retaliate against. I understand, Jake said. Protocol 7 and I can handle the transmission. You just need to give us a safe place. To prepare, the vote was close, but the rebels agreed to support Jake's plan. Over the next week, he worked with Protocol 7 to prepare a comprehensive broadcast package. The Emperor's logs were supplemented with evidence of Dominion war crimes, corruption among the leadership, and detailed accounts of the coup that had brought Admiral Craxus to Power Dot when everything was ready. Jake piloted the ship to a system near the Galactic core, far from any rebel bases but close to major Dominion communication relays. The broadcast would reach every world in Dominion. space simultaneously, making it impossible for the government to suppress the information quickly. Beginning transmission, Protocol 7 announced. All Imperial communication channels are now carrying Emperor Zephin's message. Jake watched the data flow across his displays. Knowing that billions of people throughout the galaxy were learning the truth about their government for the first time, the Emperor's words about corruption and incompetence were being heard on every Dominion world. Along with his warnings about the planned attacks on human colonies, the response was immediate and dramatic. Riots broke out on dozens of worlds as angry populations demanded answers from their leaders. Military units began defecting to the rebel cause, bringing ships and weapons with them. Most importantly, the Dominion fleet that had been preparing to attack human space was recalled to deal with the crisis at home. Additional transmission incoming, Protocol 7 reported. Source appears to be Emperor Zephin himself. Jake stared at the display in surprise as a familiar figure appeared on screen. It was Vex, but without the disguise technology. The real Emperor Zephin looked older and more tired than in his recorded logs, but his eyes still held the same intelligence Jake remembered. Jake Morrison, the Emperor said, I have been monitoring your progress, and I am pleased to see that. My faith in human ingenuity was justified? The broadcast has succeeded beyond my hopes. Where are you? Jake asked. Are you safe? I am hidden but alive, the Emperor replied. And I have a proposal for you. The Dominion is collapsing, but something must take its place. The galaxy needs a new form of government, one that respects the independence of different species while maintaining peace between them. Jake felt a familiar chill of fear. You want me to help you reclaim the throne? No, the Emperor said, surprising him. I want you to help me create something better. A federation of independent worlds with humans serving as neutral mediators. Your people's unique perspective makes them ideal for resolving conflicts between other species. The idea was ambitious and terrifying at the same time. Jake was a mechanic, not a diplomat or a statesman. But he had already done things he never thought possible, from piloting an Imperial warship to broadcasting secrets across the galaxy. What would you need from me? Jake asked. Your voice, the Emperor replied. Your credibility as someone who stands outside the traditional power structures. People trust you because you are not trying to rule them. Jake thought about his small salvage yard on New Denver Colony, now probably destroyed by Dominion forces. He thought about the rebel leaders who had risked everything to support his plan. Most of all, he thought about the billions of people throughout the galaxy who deserved a chance at freedom. I will help you, Jake said. But we do this as equals, not as emperor and subject. The Emperor smiled, the first genuine expression of happiness Jake had seen from him. I would not have it any other way. Over the following months, Jake found himself at the center of negotiations that would reshape galactic civilization. His ship became a mobile embassy, traveling from world to world as the new federation took shape. The Emperor kept his word, serving as an advisor rather than a ruler. While Jake helped different species find common ground, the work was difficult and often frustrating, but it was also rewarding in ways Jake had never imagined. He was no longer just a mechanic trying to make ends meet, but a bridge between different worlds and cultures. The Emperor had been right about human potential, and Jake was proud to represent his species on the galactic stage. Standing on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed. He had bought a piece of scrap metal and ended up helping to rebuild civilization itself. It was not the life he had planned, but it was the life the galaxy needed him to live.